Spencer Sherman, the author of the best-selling book, The Cure for Money Madness, has been consistently named as one of the top 100 wealth advisors in the country by Worth magazine. He is the CEO and co-founder of Abacus Wealth Partners. That is an independent national wealth building organization with offices actually in Los Angeles and apparently now here in Irvine, in the Bay Area, and also in Philadelphia. Spencer has created the Rainbow Portfolio, which is a diverse group of different assets, which actually are the wealth building blocks. And actually his returns have beaten the S&P 500 over the long term, which is quite remarkable. He is also has a M.B.A. in finance from the distinguished Wharton School of Business, which I believe is Donald Trump's alma mater at the University of Pennsylvania. And he has 2 children and met his wife actually cycling in the Canadian Rockies. So together he and his wife are raising 2 children as well as a permaculture garden. Please welcome Spencer Sherman.
When I was 8 years old, I was playing basketball with my buddies in a fenced-in concrete schoolyard in Queens, New York. And we were really into numbers at 8 years old. And my friend David started talking about how much money his dad made. He said, "My dad makes like $1,000 a month." And Stephen says, "You know, I've heard my dad come back and say, last week I made over $1,000 in 1 week." So Spencer, how much does your dad make? Well, I had no clue. So that night, I was so excited to ask my father this question. So my dad's sitting, eating dessert. We're in our narrow galley kitchen with our yellow vinyl swivel chairs, Bayside, Queens, New York. And I say, "So Dad, how much money do you make?" "Dad, how much money do you make?" He never answered my question. But his lack of answer spoke volumes. And the feelings that I had, the terror that I had upon seeing his expression and his lack of answer told me that you just don't talk about this topic. You don't discuss money with anyone. So not hard to imagine that I would grow up and in my 20s, I would start investing in a very impulsive way. Discuss money, discuss a possible investment with my wife, a friend, let alone another financial advisor. You've got to be crazy. You don't talk about this topic. You just do it impulsively. What I've learned from that story is that when we act on our instincts with money, like my instinct has been to be impulsive around buying investments, it costs us. It costs us in terms of stress, and it costs us in terms of money. And what I want to do today is share with you 3 simple skills for shifting from how we make money, where when we make money, earn money, starting a business, running a business, instincts are good there. They make sense there. They help us there. But our instincts don't serve us for managing our personal finances. So I'm going to share 3 simple skills on how to gain health, wealth, and wisdom with our personal finances. So thank you, Christine, for doing that table talk. That was wonderful. And I would love to hear, just to gather in some of these messages, like mine was don't talk about money. I'd love to hear some more. And if the volunteer could stand at each table and just share 2 or maybe 3 of the sort of the highlight, the ones you thought were really significant or really represented your group. It's just so we bring everybody into the room here. So if we could start over here with the volunteer, if you could stand and share the top 2 or 3 messages.
Yes, I can. Thank you
Great.
for the opportunity. Do you want these to...
Oh, and without the names. We don't need the
names.
names. Yeah.
Okay. This individual grew up in the San Fernando Valley and had enough money in his family so that all of his needs were met. And so for him, getting good grades and being an athlete was what was important.
Great.
For another one of us, there was never enough.
Never enough. Okay, great.
And for a third, and these are all really very different from each other, it's that he was always given what he needed, but always had to pay for it after he had been given it.
Interesting. Thank you. Thank you, Kathleen. All right. And Joe. Oh, Barrett. Right, Barrett. And if just because of time today, if Barrett,
I have the microphone, I'll talk.
Oh, go ahead. If just for time reasons, just if you could share the essence of sort of each the 2 or 3 messages that you heard. Yeah.
One message was, as a child, based on child support, I'm worth $40 a month. Another message is men control the money. Another message, don't trust stocks, real estate, or anything else outside. Just use cash.
Thank you.
So like the first table, we had all ends of the spectrum. So I'll give you the 3 kind of very different ones. One was there will never be enough. The second one was be grateful for what you have. Just it's going to be fine. You have enough. And the last one was I will always have enough. I'll never have to worry. Things always work out with money. So that was the gist of the 3 of them.
Thank you.
Successful people aren't very nice. And if you don't work hard, you're going to look like this, a picture of a bum on the street. And if you're going to spend your time working, you might as well work somewhere where you're going to make the most money and forget about enjoying yourself.
Well, definitely, you really have to work hard for money. Can't work hard enough. And then you got to really hold on to it. And one person said that he taught his parents.
Great. Hi.
One was, when you die, nobody can take away from you what you enjoyed. It's food and living.
Love that.
Another one was, watch your money, and it's very bad to show off that you have money. And the inference that I got from all of these, except one, was that both the mom and dad had totally different opinions about money.
Yeah, very common.
Okay, we got women should not earn money. They should not out-earn their husbands. It would be telling the world that their husbands were inadequate. Not even supposed to get better grades than our brother in school. Another one would be, wouldn't it be nice to have money from a blue-collar background, always out reaching for it in the future like it's evading. And another one was, everything had to be budgeted. If you were going to get this, you would have to do without that. So the lack of abundance. Those are, and a lot others like we've heard.
Yeah. Thank you. We get all the tables? Great. Yeah, I think you can see in hearing these answers just how much is stacked against us from the get-go, from when we're children around money. You know, and you can hear in these different messages, maybe you heard other messages from your own childhood, or maybe you heard messages from your spouse's childhood, and it'll help you feel a little more compassion towards your spouse around money. That's why, you know, he always does those impulsive investments and keeps blowing up our finances, or that's why she spends. It's not because of who they are today. They received this information when they were this high. I mean, we've got this huge hurdle to overcome from when we were children. I mean, there's just, and it's independent. I mean, this is the key thing. It's independent of how much money we have or what our financial situation is. Independent of where we are today. Those messages are driving some of the wealthiest people, the smartest people. I've given these talks to Wharton M.B.As. They're run more by these messages than anything they learned in Wharton Business School. You know, a client of mine, he got the message, you can never have enough money. So with that message, Fred comes into my office one day and he says, Spencer, I just heard about this technology stock that's going to change the way we look at the internet. I said, that's great, Fred. Great to know. He says, well, I want to invest $200,000. 20%, it was about 20% of his portfolio at the time. And he had the foresight to act and the good ethic, savings ethic to actually save up money, and built this ultra diversified rainbow portfolio with Abacus. He was really in a good shape towards retirement. And now, Fred, what are you talking about? You're going to put 20% into this one little tech stock and maybe sabotage your whole financial plan? Spencer, you just don't get it. You just don't get this company. All right, Fred, well, we meet at our quarterly meeting. It was in the winter time. It was about 10 years ago. And Fred comes in, and I had not been following this little tech stock. And sure enough, this stock has gone up in value. It's no longer $200,000. It's worth over $1 million now. It represents 50%. $1 million divided by $2 million. He's got $2 million altogether. About 50% of his wealth is in one little company. I said, Fred, you know, it's time to diversify. Remember that from when you were in 2nd or 3rd grade? Don't put all your eggs in. Yeah. Spencer, you just don't get it. You know, I know this company. Sure enough, at our spring meeting, Fred comes in, and now I'm starting to watch the stock and just see what happens. And I just will tell you, I am feeling incredibly stressed. Because as his financial advisor, I told him to sell a company worth $1 million that's now worth over $10 million. So I'm not feeling very good. See what I said, Spencer? You didn't know this company. I said, Fred, you're right, I don't know this company. But what I do know is that it's now worth 90% of your total net worth. 90%. I said, you know, they taught us a lot of sophisticated investment strategies at Wharton. And one of the things I'll never forget is they told us that 90% is a very large number. This is the time, Fred. Spencer, you just don't get it. Well, sure enough, months later, the market collapsed. That tech stock started coming down. He managed to sell it a little bit at the very near the bottom, got out about $150,000 of his original $200,000 investment. And I said, so, Fred, that was quite a roller coaster ride. What did your wife, Amy, think about this whole thing? What did she have to say about all this? And he said, you know, Spencer, I never told her about this. I said, why not? He said, you know, she doesn't know much about investing or money. And if I had told her that we had 90% of our wealth in one little company, she would have forced me to sell the stock. And that's exactly why I didn't tell her. You know, so it's just our simplicity is what brings the most wisdom often with money. His wife, of course, knew so much more in some ways than he did. Well, I thought I'll go from Fred to my story with investing in the early 20s. Actually, first I want to show you a slide here. It's just what I just talked about just now is, there we go, is concentrating. This story really illustrates that concentrating investments loses to diversification. Concentrated investments loses to diversification. And what's interesting about this is that, like I said, I've given this talk to people at Wharton Business Schools, sophisticated engineers, accountants, and yet everyone knows this, but very few people are able to implement this very simple idea. It just doesn't feel good to diversify. It's much more exciting to concentrate your money. And like I said at the beginning, it makes sense when you own your business. You concentrate your time, you concentrate your resources, you concentrate your money in your business. And that expands your business. It makes sense there. But when it comes to managing your finances, all the studies are showing us the opposite. There was a study by B. Bauer and a few other authors which showed that if you diversify your money, if you put it into different investment categories, you end up making a lot more money over time. Just that simple diversification actually makes you more money and lowers volatility. So you sleep better and you make more money. So what I want to do is show you the typical portfolio. Most people have a portfolio that's something like this, where they have 75% of your money in privately held businesses and or real estate. And then you've got some money in large U.S. stocks, some money in international stocks, some money in fixed income or bonds or CDs or savings accounts. So I just broke down, if we leave out the green portion and just look at somebody's liquid wealth, sort of the typical person has a portfolio like this, mostly large companies, and mostly these are growth companies, sort of companies like Google and Apple that everybody knows the names of. And then they've got fixed income, and then international as well. So not a ton of diversification. This is what even the brightest people in the world, when I look at their investments, it looks something like this. So what I said to myself when I was running my own money in my early 20s and starting my business, I said, what if I expanded these categories from 3 or 4 categories? What if I increased it to like 14 categories? And I came out with this, ultra diversification, what I also call the rainbow portfolio. And here we have large U.S. stocks, large value, small value, international, different types of international, emerging markets, U.S. and international commercial real estate, commodities, and U.S. and international bonds. So you can see all these different categories. The key here is that these categories all respond differently to the same economic event. And that's the key. Because when something is zagging, something else is zigging. So, and the other thing you've noticed is I don't have names of companies up here. I have categories, and that's a key idea in investing, is that investing in categories of investments versus specific investments is what leads to the most success. In other words, if commercial real estate is going to do well, it's the whole category will likely do well. And you don't need to find the perfect commercial real estate investment. So when you talk to people who have been in commercial real estate, so much of their success has had to do with the time that they were in commercial real estate. The same with international stocks or small U.S. stocks. It's all about the timing. And the brightest people will tell you it's impossible to forecast reliably. No one has a reliable crystal ball to say, when will commercial real estate do well? When will the small value or the international do well? So we combine all these different categories together. Okay. So one question you might ask, how do we come up with this allocation? How do you do that? So when you ran your own business, you worked from your gut. That's what made sense. So and this is how most people do their portfolios. They end up by default with a little bit in real estate, a little bit in some blue chip companies, a little bit in CDs or bonds, and all of a sudden they find out, wow, if I actually take the simple percentages, I'm not that diversified. So what we do is we look at how many years until you're going to start withdrawing. So how many, that might be 5 years, it might be 0 years, it might be 20 years until you're going to start withdrawing for this goal. Maybe it's retirement. So it's going to be 10 years, let's say, until I retire, and then how many years will you be retired for? We usually use 100 for most people. So that gives us two numbers. It tells us you got 10 years until you retire, you've got 30 years in retirement. Those two numbers really drive this asset allocation. See, it's done scientifically. It's rules-based. It's not subjective, emotionally based. Isn't that funny with money? Even though money is such an objective topic, emotion rules with money. Again, this is with everyone, not just people who know very little about money like my wife, but people who are sophisticated as I am with money. Emotion rules. And then we look at one other thing. We look at how much firepower do you need to get to your goals? Most people don't know. What do you actually need? Do you need a racehorse to get to your goals? Maybe you don't. Maybe a turtle's going to get you there. Maybe you can take a very conservative approach with your investments. What we have this incredible software that does this probabilistic planning, and it projects out what might happen in 300 different scenarios in the future. And then tells us, well, this client, like we had one client, we started out with 80% in equities. 80% in equities is a lot of firepower, a lot of volatility, or a lot more volatility, but high returns. And then we actually did the planning, and we found out, well, this person only needs to have 50% in equities in order to achieve their goals. So it's like everybody that it was so painful these last few years. Had they actually looked at what they needed, they might not have needed to be so much in equities. All right. We'll come back to that. Okay. All right. So, oops, I'm losing these papers here. Put this here. All right. So when I was in my mid-20s, when I started formulating some of these strategies, how did I pick investments? I said I was going from my gut. This was back in like 1989. If you remember what was going on in the world in 1989, there was the Tiananmen Square massacre. There was the Exxon Valdez disaster. There was the Berlin Wall collapsing. Each time one of these events happened, I reacted. When the Berlin Wall collapsed, what did I do? I bought European stocks. Well, that's a short thing, right? The world wall collapses, Europe is going to unify, there's going to be all this growth in Europe, buy European stocks. That makes sense. No, it was the wrong move to do at that moment. When Nelson Mandela was freed later that year, I invested in South African stocks. Again, wrong move. After the Exxon Valdez disaster, I started investing in sort of some alternative energy companies. Again, a wrong move. Each time with the Tiananmen Square disaster, I got out of all the Asian stocks. That was a bad move. So all this reacting to the markets, it was exhausting. It was all this research, all this racing around, all this reacting to what's going on in the world wasn't getting me anywhere. In fact, what I noticed is that I was doing worse than just the simple S&P 500 index. How could that be? All this racing around and research, it should be getting me something along with my M.B.A. And then I started researching other people. So I took a look at Peter Lynch. Everyone's heard of Peter Lynch. He was one of the few people who was able to beat the markets, who was able to use his intuition, his smarts to beat the market. But when he retired, Fidelity hired his successors and had Peter Lynch train the successors, paying these people millions of dollars a year And yet these successors, not only haven't they been able to match Peter Lynch's fabulous track record, they can't even beat the brainless S&P 500 index. Now that started to wake me up. If they can't do it, well, maybe I can't do it. Maybe it's not so simple to beat the S&P, to use my brain and actually figure out where to put money. And then I remembered the day. Oh, thank you. That's very helpful. I remembered the day that I said to myself, wow. This was after, there were two things that happened. After Exxon Valdez disaster, I invested in a small company that was producing bacteria to eat up oil spills. I said, well, that's a sure win. Well, the management of the company wasn't the right management, and the company started collapsing, and I basically lost almost all my money in that stock. The same week, I almost lost all my money in that little company. My mutual fund statement arrived. I was savvy enough to put a little bit of money in an index fund. And that's when I saw, wow, look at this index fund. I haven't been spending any time on it, and look how well it's done. And that was the day that I really woke up and let go of trying to do it myself and realized that if I follow these simple rules and and follow these rules of rebalancing, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, and not just use this reactive way of being with investing, I'll make a lot more money. And the funny thing about it is that this whole world of investing is very strange, because we hear things like buy low and sell high, right? Everyone knows that. Simple rule, buy low and sell high, yet nobody does it with investing. It's not interesting to human beings to buy low and sell high. It's not exciting. We do it with furniture, right? I mean, if I told you that Macy's was doubling their prices on furniture today, would you want to go out and buy furniture? But when CNBC says that the stock market has just gone up and reached a new high, we all want to go out and buy stocks. In 2006, when everyone was talking about real estate, my friend Peter told me that, did you see what's happening with Florida real estate? It's going crazy. He was excited to buy Florida real estate then. No one wants to buy Florida real estate today. Doesn't make sense to buy real estate or stocks at the bottom. I mean, how can that be? But we do it in other areas of our life, clothing, cars, we buy at the bottom, but not with stocks. Well, this really is how we do our rebalancing. So instead of thinking about what's happening in the news and switching from one category to another category, responding to world and economic news loses to objective rebalancing. And here's how we do it. So I'm going to show you this. The way we do it is you see these percentages here. And don't worry about the exact numbers, but we come up with prescribed percentages for each of our clients. And then we make sure that we always go back to that prescribed percentage. We rebalance back to it. So for example, if we start out with saying that a client should have 10% in commercial real estate, if all of a sudden commercial real estate represents 15% of their portfolio, we're going to trim some of it to get back to 10%. In that example I gave earlier of my client Fred, well, all of a sudden it became 90% of his portfolio. That's what drives us to rebalance, is those percentages. It's not knowing anything about the categories, about the individual stocks. It's a scientific, mechanical, rules-based approach. If we have money in European stocks, and all of a sudden, well, I'll give you a real-world example. In March of 2009, when international stocks had gone down so much, in March of 2009, nobody wanted to buy international stocks or emerging market stocks, companies in Mexico and Brazil. It's the last thing anyone wanted to buy. We were forced to buy those companies because we started out with a prescribed percentage of 5%, and now they're only 3% of the portfolio. So we're forced to get back to 5%. Okay. So, with all this rebalancing, with everything that's going on in the news, it's hard to stay centered. There's so much coming at us today with, our iPhones and television. We hear about the investment world so much. It's so different than it used to be. We get these constant stream of information. I mean, just imagine for a moment if there was a ticker tape on your front lawn showing you the value of your house price keeps changing. Wouldn't that be stressful? I mean, it's like we get too much information about our investments, about money in general. And I want to just say there's a lot of stressful situations with money. Whether it's when your bank statement arrives and you see all of a sudden you don't have enough to pay the bills, or you're going in for a job interview, or you're about to ask your boss for a raise, or you're trying to decide between the wool sweater and the cashmere sweater and thinking, well, should I spend the extra money? What I get? Well, I get the miles. I mean, there's a lot of stressful experiences with money. Should I lend money to a friend of mine who's in need of money? Should I make that investment? Should I do a Roth IRA? It's a very stressful topic. So I wanted us to take on what I do. When I get stressed about money, I do the money breath. So we're going to do that together here. This is a very simple thing to help make you more money and ease the stress in your life. It takes about 10 seconds. It's a simple breath. And if we're going to do an inhale and an exhale, that's it. The inhale is going to be for 3 seconds, 3 counts, a count of 3. We're going to pause at the count of 4, and then on the last 6 counts, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, we're going to do the exhale. A couple other things. The inhale is going to be through the nose. The exhale is going to be through the mouth. At the end of the exhale, we're going to say something simple. What I say is, may my money wisdom increase. I'm not looking necessarily for more money, because I don't know if that will actually lead to more happiness or not. It's, may my money wisdom increase. So let's try it together. So it's just that on the inhale, you're inhaling for a count of 3, you're pausing, and then exhaling for a count of 6. So the inhale's through the mouth, the inhale's through the nose, the exhale's through the mouth, and the exhale is twice as long as the inhale. That's something you can take with yourself. It's completely portable. Isn't it funny, have you noticed that when you're in a money situation, your breath changes? Start to pay attention. Notice that when you're about to pay for something, you're about to receive money, the bill comes in the restaurant, and you're wondering who's going to pay the bill. Do you treat? Do you share it? Notice whether your breath changes. Just when we need the most oxygen, when we need our wisdom the most, that's when we often shorten the breath. And that's why I do this money breath. I was making this comparison between running your business and running your personal finances. It's just when you run your business, you go to trade, you read the trade journals, you go to conferences, you come to things like this. This is all important for running your business. You listen to what's happening in the industry. A client of mine is in the lumber business. He found out lumber prices are about to go up, so he bought extra lumber. Another client runs a law firm, and this was about 20 years ago. He heard that there's going to be increased environmental regulations, so he started environmental law practice. That information is very helpful in the business world, but in the personal finance world, it can actually erode our wealth. It can actually erode our peace of mind around our finances, getting all that extra information. So somebody once asked me, well, how do the Nobel Prize winning economists, how do they invest their money? Well, there was actually an article in Fortune magazine saying that the Nobel Prize winning economists, most of them invest their money just as I showed you. They use these categories. Now these are, again, the brightest people around finance in the world, and they know better than to try to do the research and choose between Apple Computer and Google. I mean, my computer consultant said to me, "Hey, Spencer, I just bought Google." I said, "Why'd you do that?" He said, "Well, what do you mean? Everyone knows Google is a great company." I said, "That's exactly why you shouldn't have bought Google, because everybody knows it's already a great company. It's not so simple. What is simple is doing these investment categories." You know, it's very different. What Michael's doing, this parachute business, and this is very different. You know, in that, I mean, you need a lot of training to jump out of planes. You need a lot of training to be a great carpenter or doctor or lawyer or teacher. Or a great violinist. My son practices every day. But when it comes to money, it's the opposite. Is these brilliant stars, people like Bill Miller at Legg Mason, 20 years, 25 years investing money with a whole team of Wharton and Harvard M.B.As, all of a sudden made a decision to invest in bank stocks and completely undermined his 20-year record to the point where now he's below the S&P, that brainless index. You know, it's just everything we think that we think works in other areas like the business world doesn't work with personal finance. So what I wanted to talk about now is this. I've been sort of alluding to it. Is this next topic? This next skill is education and expertise loses to simplicity. Education expertise loses to simplicity. And talk about active versus passive. When I say active, that's everything I was talking about. The way I used to invest money was responding to the news, to the economic events, and shifting money from Europe to the States, to getting out of the market, to buying real estate in Florida, then switching it to California. All of that is very active management. What we do is a much more passive strategy where we're investing in all these categories all over the world. And what they show here on this slide is that this was a study done over the last 5 years, that over this last 5-year period, most mutual funds run by people being paid fabulous 7-figure salaries failed to beat the brainless index. And what they also found out is that you can't identify in advance which ones will beat the brainless index. So the question is, why is this field different from any other field? Why is it so easy to be successful by taking this very objective, rules-based approach? Well, one of the things that you have going for you, when you get rid of that very highly paid manager, and it could be yourself. I mean, I had to fire myself from investing. Is that you lower your expenses. It's very expensive to be reacting to what's happening in the world. And the mutual funds that are doing that have very high expenses. So that's one thing that you get rid of is expenses. The next thing you lower is taxes. You have much less taxes when you don't keep reacting to what's going on. And there are two guarantees. There are not a lot of guarantees with money, but there are two guarantees that you're going to lower your expenses and lower your taxes. So it's sort of like thinking, I'm starting out on the 35-yard line in football instead of the 10-yard line. You know, maybe you can get a touchdown from the 10-yard line, but I increase my chances of getting a touchdown or at least a field goal if I start out on the 35-yard line. Yeah. So what's the disadvantage of all this? Well, I think I've alluded to it. This is incredibly boring, this strategy. It's no fun. It's not exciting. You know, you can't talk about this stuff. When this meeting ends, I think a few of us are going over to Starbucks and talking. You can't talk about this stuff. It's much more exciting to talk about what's the latest iPhone that Apple just came out and whether we should be investing in an Apple computer. That's exciting. Or what about this biotech company that's going to cure cancer? Or this new solar energy company that's going to take care of our energy needs? That's exciting conversation. So you have to, one of the things I had to recognize is that I was going for adrenaline. I was going for excitement. And finally I said, you know what? I want money. Who said it? Christine said, who wants more money? I want more money. I'm done with excitement. I'm going to find excitement in another area like Michael has found. No, I'm not going to do the hang glide, but I did do zip lining the other day with my son. I'm going to find excitement in another area. Maybe I'll write a book. In fact, I did. I freed up so much time by not responding to my investments the way I had been doing that I had enough time to write a book. I mean, think about what you might be able to do if you started having a rules-based, objective system for handling your finances. So let me show you this here. This study here was just showing what I showed before, that in January 2000, when you should have been most pessimistic, you can see that there was the highest score, 178. This is a Gallup index. People were most optimistic. And then in February 2009 here at the bottom, when you should have been most optimistic, people were most pessimistic. So, all of this has shown, that we can't really trust our emotions. That I'm no different from any other human being. And my emotion will often want to get aggressive or be optimistic when the markets are high and be pessimistic or fearful when the markets are low, just the opposite of what I should be doing. So what's the cost of this emotion? This was a study done by Dalbar. It showed that the average investor turns $100,000 into $187,000. This is the average investor over 20 years. This is from 89 to 2009. They did this study. The S&P 500, $484,000. So the cost of excitement is $300,000. This was the other study that got me to let go of excitement, was I'll take the $297,000 instead of excitement. That's the payoff if you're willing to find excitement in some other area of your life. So what's the benefit of all this? Are there, how has Abacus done, sort of what's the dessert, given that it's boring? Yes, you make some more money, but I thought I'd show you. So these are our disclaimers here, some of our notes here that our lawyers require us to show. And you can see all this later if you want to. I can get you a copy of this. But I wanted to share with you that by doing that simple, this is the simple strategy I talked about earlier, just doing this rainbow ultra diversified portfolio, just this simple portfolio, and rebalancing every time these percentages get out of whack. This led to, over the last 10 years here, I'm going to show here, we had a 6.2% average return over the last 10 years. This is from the end of 99 to 2009, this last 10-year period. 6% return. The S&P did negative 0.9%. So again, we didn't do anything fancy here. This is after all fees. This is over the complete period, 73 to 2009, 11.6% versus 9.6%. So almost twice as much money. Actually, it was this 10-year period here. If you started with $1 million, the 6.2% means you have about $1.8 million. The 0.9% means you have about $920,000. So $1.8 million over the last 10 years versus $920 from $1 million starting point. Again, this is not doing anything fancy. This is something that everybody can do. As long as you can get rid of your emotion, you can take on this kind of diverse, simple strategy. So, this rules-based approach reminded me of a friend of mine went to see his eye surgeon. And his story very much reminded me of this. He asked his eye surgeon, "Why should I hire you?" And the eye surgeon said, "You know what? I'm chubby. I'm balding. CNN never calls me for an interview. I don't have plaques on my walls. I didn't go to Ivy League schools. But I've done 3,000 of these laser eye surgeries. And I do every one the same way. I never improvise. And every one of those 3,000 eye surgeries has been successful." Well, I made the decision to hire my own financial advisor. I wanted the attributes of that eye surgeon in my financial advisor, someone who could be that objective. There's just too much at stake. So when my clients and I have taken on these 3 rules, these 3 simple rules, and these practices, we've created a life that is healthy, wealthy, and wise. Yeah. Okay,